Okay, right. All right. Okay, that's actually pretty nice. We'll move on to the next question. Okay, we already talked about like how you review opportunities, right? And we talked about in for new businesses expanders, right? And we talked about an instance where you completely renewed a plan for a client and that led to major revenue growth, right? So, is there a point where you like identified a major or created a major opportunity for the company, strategic opportunity?
So no, this wasn't necessarily like opportunities that I created. What it's more, I guess you see, and this is where my wording is probably off. The opportunities that I created were basically so we had some big customers where especially in the strategic field, where the sales rep wasn't, we didn't hold the sales team responsible for placing these orders for the customer. So what would happen is um, we would create these generic emails. So we'll say, customer A at Verizon Connect, and that customer would email that distro and place orders, and my team would take care of placing those orders directly for the customer. So it would kind of skip the sales rep, although these orders were put under the sales reps team and they were still paid out for them. It was more like more of a data entry type of task for my team. But I would go in there and basically, or sometimes they wouldn't even come directly from the customer. It was directly from the sales team. So the sales team would call me and say, hey, on a customer XYZ wants to order 100 more units. These are the VINs. So they would provide me with a list of VINs, and I would take care of creating the opportunity, engaging the solutions engineer, making sure that I was including the right services for the right price um, for this specific
Right.
customer, and I would submit the order um, for fulfillment.
Okay, so essentially, you weren't exactly the one who identified an opportunity, you were more like the one, like you were part of this whole opportunity creation process. You were part of the process where you identified new, like where you like closed down these new leads, right? Am I correct?
Correct. Correct. I was basically this.
Oh,
This was more a sales support task, um, so
hmm,
that the sales reps had more time and more opportunity to be out in the field talking to the customer directly instead of having to do this admin work where they have to go in there and figure out what products need to be on the sales order, what products need to be included, uh, at what pricing the customer has been sold these specific SKUs to before. Uh, we would take care of that admin part of it. So this was more, like I said, of an admin task.
right, I understand. Okay. Okay, we also already talked about like the complex strategic contracts that you like helped like that you analyzed and helped the company identify discrepancies like in these contracts and errors in these contracts, right? Is there any other instance that you would like to mention regarding this, like how you helped identify errors or discrepancies in complex strategic contracts and how that like helped the company? Any other thing, or are we done?
I think we're done with that one.
Okay, we're done with this one. Okay, authority to accept or deny a contract. Okay, authority to approve. Okay, so what were the tools and strategies and that you use to analyze like pricing and make decisions to approve or deny deals?
Um, we were basically we were provided with pricing guidelines. So this was something that the finance team created for my department. We had a matrix that very specifically listed out if this new customer is trying to uh, add X amount of units for this type of service and the discounting is more than 10%, you can approve it. Or you
Right.
can, if it's less than 10%, you can approve it. We, um, so that way it would skip the finance team altogether. If it fell within the guidelines of this matrix that was provided for us, we were allowed to go ahead and approve. If for whatever reason this deviated at all from the guidelines that we were provided, then at that point we would engage the finance team.
Right. Okay. And okay, so you essentially analyze these pricings and made decisions based on A, pricing guidelines, and B, consulting the finance team, correct?
Correct.
Right. So, were you in any way involved in like developing these pricing guidelines or recommending improvements for these pricing guidelines? Like you saw something on the field and that led you towards taking initiative and telling the sales team or finance team, "Hey, we can improve this guideline in this and this way." So, was there any such instance?
Yes. So there was a point where we had, we had a list of over 1,000 SKUs of between software services and hardware that we would sell. At some point, the company went through a product rationalization, which reduced our SKUs down to by like 70%. I was not part of this project. This was just something that I don't even know what team took care of it. But
Okay.
project lead, they took care of the product rationalization.
Right.
However,
Okay.
once it was rolled out, and again, my team was not involved in that project at all, but it was rolled out. It basically generalized our SKUs. So instead of having 5 different like hardware accessories listed out individually, we had one SKU that was called accessories basics, accessories specialized, and this basically separated our accessories, divided it into 2, and basically said these are the 2 SKUs. And
Right.
in
Okay.
right, and then once it got to fulfillment, our fulfillment team would figure out what it needed to be, but it really cleaned out our sales orders. So instead of having a sales order with 3 different products, it brought it down to 1. As long as they were all a basic accessory, we could use that same SKU. However, in our legacy world, those I'm just going to use generic numbers here. We had, let's say, 5 SKUs that all fell under that accessories basics SKU. However,
Right.
in the
Okay.
legacy world, these products all had a different price. And in the new world, we had to map it out to have only one price, which is fine. Like the sales team was able to just kind of average out what the customer was I guess purchasing these SKUs for, and just use one average price for that SKU. But a lot of customers were giving us pushback, and before that happened, that is something that I was able to kind of identify was a concern that I brought up. So what ended up happening is when the finance team gave us that guideline and said, okay, we're going to have one price for this SKU, I don't know how they didn't think about this before, but I was like, okay, well, what happens if the customer wants to buy, if they have these 2 SKUs that they want to buy? So, and again, just to give you an example, if they have a key fob, which is a tiny little $2 accessory, and they have temperature monitoring, which is a more complex accessory that we usually sell for $20-$30. Like, how are we supposed to sell both of those things for the same price? They're 2 completely different pieces of hardware, and they're 2 completely different prices. Like, they're not, that $2 and the $30 SKU can't be grouped into the same product, which
They
resulted
didn't
in.
realize this.
I'm sorry.
They didn't realize this.
Oh my gosh, I wish you knew all of the things that they didn't realize. There was a lot of issues like this, and especially because we were going. So this company went through product rationalization, Salesforce consolidation, the 3 mergers, because they bought, it was between Network Fleet, Fleetmatics, and Telligis. They acquired all of us at the same time. So we were going through 3 different efforts here, all while I mean, with any acquisition, there's going to be turnover. So there was different teams, different people, and the thing was, a lot of people didn't know these things. My team was one of the very, very few um, teams that were there from that knew the Telligis product. So no,
Oh,
nobody realized such a simple thing. Like, how are we going to sell a $30 accessory and a $2 accessory for the same price? Like that, the customer,
oh,
they're not going to be okay with that. And sure enough, like while we were going through the efforts of figuring out, okay, well, maybe we need another SKU. Maybe we do need to create another more specific SKU for these two things, or XYZ. At that point, like, even though we were already going through the efforts of fixing these issues, these concerns, there was already being a lot of customer dissatisfaction, because customers went from being able to pay $2 for a key fob to having to use this one accessory product SKU that was $20.
right. And now, like that, you identified this very, very obvious thing that they should have known. Like after that, did you help them? How should I put this? Modify or revamp the pricing or the pricing guidelines accordingly to like.
Yeah, so that was, I think that the biggest thing that came out of this specific scenario um,
Right.
was the fact that my team was not being included in these projects. Like, this
Okay.
product rationalization project was huge, and nobody included us in these conversations. So these things kept happening because we weren't invited to these parties, for lack of a better word. You know, so one of the biggest things that came out of this was that the engagement of these senior representatives like myself, to kind of say, hey, like, and again, like, a lot of the times I didn't necessarily have the solution. I just raised my hand and said, hey, these things aren't going to work because of this and this. How are you guys going to fix this?
Right. Okay. Yeah. You just said na, how are you guys going to fix this, right? And these things aren't going to work. So you were involved in these discussions, right? You took the initiative to join these discussions yourself, or were you like asked by the other teams, like, come out here and please help us identify the problem?
Well, at the beginning, no, at the beginning we were not invited, if you will. It was more of a, hey guys, this, like, these teams would say, okay, here's this new, we're rolling this out, this is a new, in this case, for example, here's the product rationalization list, these are the new plans that we're going to be selling, here they are. So at that point, I would have to raise my hand and say, hey, I have a question about this, what about this and this and this? So it wasn't
Right.
so much, I mean, yeah, I guess it was the initiative, but it was more, I was in a position where I'm like, well, I know sales is going to ask me what to do, so I need to ask you what you need me to do with this product, with this new plan that you rolled out.
Right. Okay. And you help them fix their new like sales plan or their pricing plan, right?
Correct.
Right. And like when you, okay, so you identify problems in these plans and you help them fix it. Okay, so these are like, okay, so we were talking about that SKUs bit, right? So they generalized like lots of different accessories into only a couple of SKUs. Like there were a lot of accessories and they brought them down by 70%. The SKUs were brought down by 70%, generalized into like only a handful of them, right? Only a handful of products or SKUs. All right. So what I want to ask here is that when you brought like other than this whole mess of a thing that was created and you helped identify and solve, other than this, were there any other such like things related to integration and working of many different functions together, like any similar problems created by all these functions working together and not working properly that you had to solve?
Um, I mean, yes,
Like,
we did a lot of that. I was part of I was part of a lot of these um consolidation efforts. I wouldn't
right,
say
okay.
necessarily help fix anything, but it was more testing, or they would come to me and say, hey, how is this supposed to work? And I would only all I would do was show what our current process is and what certain fields did or how certain things were supposed to work.
Right. Is this the same like consolidation effort? Wait a second. Like I think this was mentioned in one of the bullet points below a consolidation effort.
Yeah, I think it's one of the last ones. Yeah, it's
Right.
the
Hello?
yeah, it's
Hello?
the last. Can you hear me?
Hello? Anna?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Okay. Yeah, it's these last things, right?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, in one of the like in the what's this called? This whole recommendation that I've posted here. It's also mentioned within a year's time frame. You began with the SFDC consolidation projects, which range from
Sorry,
being a subject matter. Hello?
you're cutting off. I'm sorry.
Yeah, this call is cutting off at certain points.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I like. Okay, okay. Let's see if you can hear me properly now. Within a year's time frame, you began assisting with SFDC consolidation projects, which range from being a subject matter expert for the sales ops organization, an advocate for sales during the process, user testing, and phased launches. Like this is one of the things that another person is saying about you, right?
Yeah. Mhm.
Right. She was, I believe, your manager at,
Correct.
I believe, Verizon. Right.
Yes.
Okay. So, like, could you like explain what you did here in these consolidation projects, like how you were a part of, what were these projects, how did they benefit the company, and like what was.
Well, I mean, they benefited the company because I mean, at the point before I left the company, everybody was still working out of 3 different Salesforce instances.
Oh, all right.
So there was a lot of, I mean, there was so much room for error because not not only was it like just one department having to go into 2 different Salesforce instances with 2 different logins, but the sales team was just spending so much time putting in these orders. And I'm sorry, give me one.
Right. Go.
Okay. So, like the sales team was being asked to work out of these two instances, and some, like I said, and sometimes 3, but for the majority of the team, at least the teams that I supported, they had to work off of 2 instances. So they would go into one instance, input some of the information, and then go into a second one and have to input, the rest of the information in because things weren't being transferred properly. So my contribution to that was, during these releases, I would do I would do a lot of testing. So I would go into, like I said, in both of these instances, and kind of test out the changes that they had made, and see how these fields were being mirrored, or what they weren't, or how they weren't being mirrored, or what things were supposed to be working that were just not working properly.
All right. Okay. And like you helped consolidate all of these like in different instances of Salesforce into like one system that the entire sales team, that the entire company can use.
Um, Well, so the way it was playing out is, Verizon hired a third party company to complete this project. All I would do, my role here was just to help, identify what processes needed to be kept from our Salesforce instance, to the new one, and
Right. Okay. So
again
this
making
was your.
sure testing that it was working properly.
Okay. So this was your like contribution here, right?
hmm Yeah, it was a
All
team
right.
effort.
Okay.
There was maybe 15 15, 20 people that would meet every quarter. And
Right. Hello,
yes, sorry.
Anna.
We would meet every quarter to, we all just sat in a room, and it was people from different departments that would, say, well, these are the processes that I would do, and this is what they look like.
Right. Okay. All right. So these like 15 people from like different okay, so were these like 15 people from different functions? Was this a cross-functional project?
I'm sorry.
uh, like you said, you worked like on these you worked with 15 people, 15 other people on these consolidation projects, correct?
Hmm.
So
Correct.
were these 15 people yeah, so were these 15 people from different like different functions? Was this a cross-functional project?
Hmm. Correct.
Yeah, all right, okay. All right, so we discussed that. And other than this, let's move on to, okay, you said that you shared okay, so like let's move on to page 3 again. You
Hmm.
said that you share best practices and mentors sales reps, correct?
Hmm.
So, like, what do you mean by sharing best practices? Where do you find these best practices? How do you share them? How do you like if you how do you implement them in your team, and like what improvements do these yield?
So these were not necessarily for my team; they're for the sales team. So
All right.
being that I supported the sales team, I just had a lot more um, experience, and I had a lot more exposure to, the sales process, and the anatomy of an opportunity, and